Welcome, Jochen. Today we're going to be looking at the complexities of educating healthcare professionals and caregivers on the use of medical equipment, so medical devices, solutions, and software, and making sure that they get the most out of the technology that they've invested in. The technology has the impact that it was designed to have. And I think as part of these discussions, we'll also get to look at some potential solutions around how to accelerate the technology adoption, and also really to make sure that the medtech is being optimized, just for the short term, but really over the life cycle of the entire product. So before we start, maybe I introduce myself quickly. My name is Sarah Morton, and I consult with medtech and B2B companies on the customer decision journey optimization. But prior to that, I had worked in the healthcare industry for over 25 years, most recently with Philips, where I looked after internal training and sales excellence and was also head of customer education, among a variety of other roles. So Jochen, before we start, maybe you want to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah. Jochen Hildebrand. We started Simpi like 5 years ago. Before that, had different other companies, electrical engineer by training. And what the guiding principle was always around know-how. So not knowledge, but know-how, meaning if you do have a problem in whatever field it is, the key is always to find that person that knows how to do it best, actually. Yes, there are books and yes, there's training, but if you really want to know how it works, then it's all about know-how. And so we were striving to find solutions to get as close to this paradigm basically as possible. And for that, we built platforms for large enterprises, for know-how exchange. And like I said, 5 years ago, made the decision to recreate a new company around the new concept, which is now Simpi.
Excellent. Sounds like a very interesting history and background.
So Sarah, you were head of customer educations in the Middle East, Africa. What is the overall goal of a medtech company when putting together a training plan?
I guess ultimately when we're putting together a training plan, our ultimate goal really is linked to our business objectives, which is typically customer happiness. So, we used to measure the net promoter score, but the role that education plays in that, I would say, is in 3 areas. So one is in the initial training, so in the handover, you really want that initial customer experience with the product to be amazing, to go very smoothly and to start them off on their journey in a sort of a professional and I want to say sort of exciting manner. Then over the medium to long term, we're looking for our customers, so the caregivers, to really master the products. So really have a good understanding of how they can optimize the use of their technology. So, in the initial training, typically you're focusing on the basics, but as you go into the journey with the caregiver, you really want them to be able to understand and then use all of the advanced features. And then ultimately, sort of really, really long term, your goal is that you want them to buy from you again, right? You want them to, love that technology so much that they either, want to, buy a new version of it, they want to buy upgrades to it, they want to buy add-ons, or ultimately that they become promoters for your products as well. So, they're shouting from the rooftops about how much they liked your products. So if I had to summarize it, I guess customer happiness, but that sometimes seems a bit vague, but that's really what we had in mind.
Okay, so what have been the challenges then in implementing this?
I think one of the biggest challenges was sort of timing, the whole logistics of it. You want to get as many people trained on the products as possible. And as you can imagine, in a healthcare environment, that can be very difficult. You might have your equipment stationed in many, many different departments. You also have a lot of staff per department, and it can be very tricky to make sure that all of the staff are trained adequately in one go. And then really, once you've got all the staff together, or, you found a time slot which is suitable for all of the different users of your products, then you've also got to align it internally with your own experts. So I found that the timing thing to be, one of the biggest challenges. Also, just talking about the people aspect, you have, particularly in healthcare, staff come from many, many different backgrounds. They have, different levels of knowledge. They've been, trained in different systems. And so having to educate, that mix of people to use your products meant that sometimes you had very, very different starting points. And you had, if you were offering classroom training, you would have caregivers in there that were really starting from different points of knowledge. And then the other thing, which sadly happens more and more often these days, is that there is a high amount of staff turnover. So even if you have managed, to find, the ultimate time spot for everyone to get together, you've got the ultimate training plan. It often happens that 6 months down the line, then people have changed jobs. They've moved to different hospitals, and so then that knowledge is lost, and you almost then have to sort of start the training cycle again. So those are the biggest challenges. And I think also important to mention, especially if you're dealing with nurses, that nurses have to interact with a huge amount of devices, everything sort of from infusion pumps to ventilators to patient monitors to blood pressure cuffs. I mean, if you go into like an ICU, it's full of different equipment from different manufacturers. And it could also be that, even one type of product can be sourced from many, many different manufacturers. So that's also tricky, I think, because you're facing like a team of people that are almost like being bombarded with, training from all of these different companies. And it's impossible really for, one person to master, that many devices to the level of expertise that you would want them to have in order to get the best out of the technology. So I think, those were the biggest challenges, I would say. I'm sure there's more, but those are the biggest ones.
So, and how did you actually overcome these challenges?
We actually took a handful of hospitals, designed some very tailored, very specific training programs just for those hospitals, or actually even just for specific departments in those hospitals. So we sat down with the departmental heads. We understood what their goals were. We talked to them about what role that the medical devices or the technology would be able to contribute to those goals. Then we did like a gap assessment and then designed the training program really to help the entire department. So all of the different healthcare professionals in that department move step by step to getting the capabilities that would help them get the most out of the equipment and therefore reach their goals. And we did that through on-site training. We did a lot of work with our application specialists who gave the one-to-one sessions where needed. We complemented that with online trainings, and also we even provided like seats in classroom trainings to focus more on competencies rather than, like use of the products. It was very, very complex. It was very successful, I have to say. So the hospitals that we designed these programs for, they managed to increase their patient referrals by, in some cases, about 30%, because they suddenly, had a load more competencies, capabilities, they could do many more like new different procedures. But of course, those types of programs are not especially scalable. So I don't necessarily think that, I'm very proud of what we did, but I don't necessarily think that it's the way forward if you want to come up with training programs that are scalable, sustainable, and really usable for the long term of your relationship with a specific customer.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that, you've also been involved a lot with medtech companies and helping them achieve their goals. So what would you have done in my situation? How would you have overcome some of those challenges?
Yeah, not everything differently, obviously.
Good.
But if you take a look at professionals today, and like you said, and the technology and the advancements in technology is getting ever more faster, it's getting ever more complex. And what no one has, and especially in the healthcare sector, is time. So our objective was always to, you can ask them to take a training, But then their faces will go like this, and said, I won't have time. And it sometimes try to sneak out, whatever. But if they take the time, then they're more or less click next, click next, click next. Then you go through slides to something like this. And there have been numerous studies that say the only thing that you learn, so once you have a fundamental level, of course, so you first know what you're talking about, but up from there, it's all about practicing, and it's all about supporting you in these crucial steps that are missing. It's just like if kids are riding a bike, you won't give them a learn how to ride a bike. You won't give them a book. You will sit them, you will place them on their bicycle, basically, and tell them to try it out, and then they will not succeed. And then you just give them these 2 tips that they need to get to the next level. And this is in a professional life, it's just the same. So once you have this basic understanding, these fundamentals, and it's all about practicing, and then it's all about giving them these tidbits of information that they are needed actually when they need them. And they won't find it in a training, and they typically won't find it in a handbook. Maybe it is there, but here access is the crucial problem. So if they're at the bedside, for example, it wouldn't be too smart if they start to take the handbook, and start reading how this procedure went. Or if they look at a video where it's 10 minutes after it has started, where actually it is explained what you need to do. So it needs to be quick. It needs to be like TikTok is only that successful because they give you information after 2 seconds, basically. Once you log in, you immediately have the information. And if it's not the right one, then you scroll, and here it is. So it's all a matter of time. And to make this available, you have to chunk your content into small sizes. To make this work, you have to ensure that you separate all the information into small steps, into small snippets of information. And once you have that, then you can dynamically provide them actually as they are needed. And you either put them in sequence, and the professional can very quickly skip through them, like in a TikTok video, and say, no, this is not okay, this is the step that I'm looking for. So also getting reconfirmation about what he should have done or she should have done up until now. Then focus on the steps and maybe repeat the steps that are now in question. And then she would basically proceed and go through the rest of the procedure. So this would make sure that actually the time is used most effectively and that no steps are overlooked. And the other one is that they're guided through the process.
That makes sense. So you're talking about making sure the information is readily available in context, so at the point of need. And you talked about these like snippets of information, so like TikTok style, short amount of information. So I've heard you talk about this concept of how-tos before. Is that what you mean when you talk about snippets of information?
Yes, exactly. If you think of it, what I stated earlier, if you had a mentor next to you and you would get stuck in one or the other step, then they would actually tell you exactly what to do next. And this could be like, typically they would show you how to do the next step until you take over again. And this is what we're trying to mimic, meaning it can either be a video snippet of like 5 seconds, only turn this knob, take out the sensor, clear this filter. Then typically there's a voice instruction with it that is automatically generated and translated to any language. So you don't have the language barrier in there. And there's also a text cue to address all the different types of learners, basically. And this snippet or this how-to step is actually self-sufficient. So you can choose to put these steps into any order that you want to, either manually, or you can dynamically have them put together by the system.
Let's say a hospital department has a new hire, they could start like literally from step 1. Whereas if they wanted to, get a refresher on some of the advanced features, they can go directly to that feature, right?
Exactly. So typically, the way it works typically is these medtech corporations or these health tech providers, they reach out to an agency that builds their training. But then something changes. Maybe the user interface has changed in a new revision and it looks a little different now, but then the training is mostly obsolete, actually, because people, even if it's just one step or it's just one screen, people will say, oh, this is outdated. Then they typically go back to the agency, they do a recompile or whatever it is, and it is a lengthy process and obviously it's costly. So once you have everything in place, more or less, then we make a self-service model available, self-service editor available to the customer, that they can change these steps themselves. And it can either be a quick update, it can either be the example I just mentioned, where you need just a new photo that they do with their cell phone, and then they fill it in. Or it can be that, coming back to your example, that there's a new hire, and then you pick and choose these right snippets actually that you need, and you come up with your own course.
So that's amazing, because one of the biggest challenges I had, whether it was internal training or training for end users of our products, was making sure that the content was kept up to date. And as you said, like typically today, it's difficult to update content and then make sure that it's consistently updated throughout all of your different systems and information sources. So the way that you've designed it means that it's bite-sized chunks of information. So these how-to steps, it just means it's easy to swap in and swap out or make a quick update. So yeah, that would have made my life a lot easier, I have to say. It would have been a good way for us to train the hospital departments and the caregivers, because as I said, there was such a high turnover of staff that it became very difficult for us to keep up with that and keep up with all of their needs. So I can imagine that if I had the Simpi platform and these how-tos, then I could have enabled the caregivers more in order for them to do the type of training that they needed. And also, so one of my biggest challenges was really sort of making sure that over the long term, the advanced features were used, and it was very difficult to train on those like right at the beginning, or if you did, then the information would be forgotten. With these how-to snippets with the Simpi platform, I feel that the advanced features can be accessed and trained on really at the point of need. So whether that's 6 months down the line, whether it's 6 years down the line, it's still available, and it would be very easy for the caregiver to dive right into that exact piece of information that they needed, or for our own application specialists to, really go back in, a year later, almost, provide a sort of a new product training for these advanced features that probably hadn't been used as much by them.
So it's crucial to say, and this is how we built Simpi, that it works with your existing infrastructure. So Simpi is a format for these snippets of information, like I said, or modular steps, but they run in the browser. So there's no registration, there is no installation. So whenever you have a browser, it does work, meaning you can embed these Simpi steps into your training and augment them with practical hands-on information. Or you could, customers of ours, they print out a QR code and put this on the device so that caregivers have the information rightly available by scanning a QR code, or they even give it to their patients to take them in their home healthcare settings so that they know exactly what to do. So we're a good citizen in terms of IT environment. We basically, healthcare provider is the one that applies all the security settings that they have in the hospital to these Simpis that work inside the infrastructure.
Oh, that's fantastic. So that you've taken it even one step further than I had initially thought about. So yeah, it would be very easy to implement these how-to snippets and use the Simpi approach. So it's all been very interesting so far. You've done a lot of innovative things. As I know you, I know that there's going to be much more planned for the future. So can you share any secrets about what's next for Simpi?
Yes, sure. With all the possibilities that these new AI models, like the GPT models or these so-called large language models provide, there's a great opportunity for us to move closer to this mentor paradigm. Meaning, as a learner or as a practitioner, you should be able to ask the system what to do next, basically, and not just ask the question, but maybe take a photo, take out your smartphone, make a snapshot of the device or the monitor screen or the user interface where you're at, where the system actually detects where you actually are and where it recommends the next steps. The challenge here for us to implement is obviously it always needs to be exact information. So here we're making use of, for example, the IFU or any other documents that you may have, so that the information is referenced directly from there. Next challenge is to have it still graphically visualized the way that I explained it before. So it would not work to just have a chat interface, where the typing and the system answers. It needs to be, like coming back to the TikTok example, it needs to be instantly available. It needs to be browsable, but also reviewable by healthcare providers. So these are the topics that we're working on, where we're making big progress, and where I'm super happy to share the first results once they're available.
That sounds very exciting. So we've come to the end of today's conversation. We've covered a lot of topics, really focusing on how to address some of the complexities of educating healthcare providers in optimizing the technology that they've invested in. So you shared some very interesting ideas. I wish you'd been around when in my sort of 10 years of trying to come up with the ultimate training and education programs. But glad to see the progress that has been made. So it's a pleasure speaking with you as always, and I hope we get to catch up again soon.
Sure. Thank you very much, Sarah.